Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. So happy to be here this morning. It is January 6th, Saturday morning at 11 a.m. We are joined by Laxmi Dady, our co-author for our new book, 21 Spiritual Lessons for the 21st Century. I'm Laurent Weichberger. I'm your host today. There's the book. She's holding it up. And we're going to discuss a little bit about each of us, what we're doing with this book, why we wrote this book. I'm going to let Laxmi introduce herself. Some of you already know me, but I'll say a few words myself, and then we'll get into a conversation. This is not really us talking at you. This is going to be a conversation about spirituality in light of Meher Baba, and it's universal as well. So, Laxmi, could you please share a few words of introduction about yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Laxmi. That's my birth name. My dad's from India. He's from Tamil Nadu. He was actually raised in a Catholic orphanage. So he's like a Hindu, Indian, Catholic combo. And I'm from Portland, Oregon. Laurent has been a spiritual mentor of mine for 7 years. And we met at a hippie restaurant in Ashland, Oregon, where I was overhearing him attempting to impart Baba's wisdom on his younger son, Cypress. And his son was like, I just want to be rich and live in New York City. Baba this, Baba that, Baba, Baba. And I thought that conversation was so hysterical that I asked to introduce myself, and the rest is history. Laurent's been very giving to me of spiritual wisdom and guidance throughout the years. And this book is 3 years in the making, and I'm so grateful to share it with all of you.
Thank you for that, Lakshmi. For those who don't know me, I've been with Baba since 1986. I learned about Baba from Michael Matthias up in Manhattan. In those days, Charles, I remember you coming up to New York. I met you in those early days for me. I met many of Baba's disciples. I met Baba's beloved Mera in India. And after a few years, I got into contact with Don Stevens. I did a tremendous amount of work with Don Stevens around what his agenda was from Baba. Translations of Baba's words. He wanted Don to translate into different European languages, and sharing that Baba's words were extremely important spiritually. And in addition, Baba imparted to Don the news that Baba's gift as the avatar of this age was that of intuition, and that people would be using intuition more and more. And that it didn't mean that nobody used intuition before that, but like he said, Baba said at the time of Jesus, Baba's gift as Jesus was that of love. And so that it didn't mean nobody, felt and gave love before Jesus, but it was a gift to humanity that they used it more and more. So in that spirit of love and spirituality, Lakshmi and I, basically, she asked me to come on her show. Do you remember this Conscious Hotline, Lakshmi?
Yes. Still on YouTube and Instagram.
Right. So she invited me onto her Instagram sort of live spiritual. You can talk more about it, but it was like a very vibrant, dynamic spiritual show. And she asked me about my experience of spirituality in Meher Baba. And after that, we had such a great time. I think you remember, Lakshmi, I said, why don't we do a book together or something? And she said, yeah, let's do it. So she came up with the idea of 21 spiritual lessons for the 21st century. That was not my idea. And I'm going to share my screen, and maybe you can see this. Can you see my table of contents, or does that not show up? Awesome. So you can see what happened was, because there were 21 lessons, I took 10 and she took 11. And we kind of made lists of what subjects we'd like to discuss in the book. And so for some reason, our list did not overlap, which was great. And so you can see which ones she did, which ones I did. And I'm going to go first and talk about the one that, for me, is, of course, nearest and dearest to my heart, which is the Avatar 267. Now, when I talk about this, I want it to be clear that Lakshmi can speak to this while I'm looking for this, but the the target audience for our work is the younger generation. And why do I say that? Lakshmi, can you say a few words about why it's important that this book is targeting the younger generation from your point of view? Why did you want that to be the thrust and the kind of the goal?
Well, the leading cause of death for young people in America, 18 to 25, is death by suicide. And we have the highest rate of suicide in recorded human history of any generation in our entire span of recording life on Earth as humans. And so Laurent and I were talking about that on the Conscious Hotline, and we were both recognizing what a problem it is. And we talk about it in the book. The intro kind of goes into more of the stats on why and what's happening. And I think especially with the pandemic, think about the 5 to 7-year-olds, right? That really formative time that they were isolated and deprived of social interaction, and just technology kind of consumed. That was how everyone was learning and living. And we know that increase in technology consumption can decrease serotonin and joy and happiness and ability to intrinsically motivate. And so it's a huge problem plaguing my generation as a millennial, but then especially Gen Z, like Laurent's son's generation, and then the generation following that, Gen Alpha. And so the book is geared towards, I would say, 16 to 25-year-olds, depending on how mature they are, because we do talk about things like sex and drugs. So 18 to 25 is what I say to be safe. And it's really like, it's a guide for young people to find spirituality in a non-denominational way, in whatever way works for them. Obviously, Baba has worked for all of you on the call, and Laurent, and my background's very eclectic spiritually. And so it's trying to just show young people, like, find something. The last chapter is, you got to have faith. And it's like, I don't care what it is, but if you're living for the TikTok likes and the Instagram thumbs ups, of course your life is going to feel meaningless and desperate. So that's kind of why we targeted the young people. And also they have the lowest rate of church attendees of any generation in recorded human history. So highest rate of suicide, lowest rate of church attendance. We think there's a correlation there.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And so from my point of view, when I'm targeting that generation and saying, okay, what tone do I take? How do I in any way articulate spirituality to that younger generation? And I think, well, obviously I have to mention Mayor Baba as the avatar and all the other avatars. I have to let them know that that's supremely important. And there's all these other subjects, right? So honesty and drugs and everything else it's all important. And so I gave an image of Mayor Baba, which I think is a beautiful image. I very gently describe the role of the avatar. And then, it's like that way that Baba trusts us to be grown-ups with him, in the sense of he doesn't give a lot of, do this, don't do that. Obviously, he said, don't worry. He said, don't do drugs. But his avatar mission is, it's almost that same gift of intuition. It's find that way to me in you. Find me within you. Find me in your heart. Live with me. It's not do this, don't do that. So I want to trust that the younger generation will pick up on these cues. So the chapters I wrote are short. They're rather succinct in what I'm trying to get across. I quote Vanessa here: God is a verb. I love the idea of changing the narrative from kind of nouns and structures and rules and kind of the stereotypical God of churches and mosques and religions and rites and ceremonies, which Baba said you do not need, to the sahavas within you with Baba, being with Baba day in and day out, moment by moment. That's my desire, is to share that with the younger generation. And I believe we did that. So that's what I want to say about, we could talk about all the chapters and we're going to open it up to the whole floor, but that's what I want to say about mine. And on 175, Lakshmi is going to start a few words about her finding the I in we. There is no I in we. Can you speak about this, Lakshmi?
Yeah. So I think especially for younger generations, we're so tapped into the collective through social media that it's sometimes hard to find sense of self in the presence of so much societal information, right? There's very little mystery left. because you can just Google everything, even little kids, right? We used to like think about why things were a certain way. And now 7, 8-year-olds, they're just like, well, just ask Google. Oh, mystery solved. So there's very little space for self, right? In the presence of followers and clicks and bings and dings. And so this chapter was especially pertinent for me as a recovering codependent and trying to figure out, how can I remain myself and be in this larger collective, whether that's the collective of family or work or interpersonal relationships or the internet presence. And I wrote this chapter and then it disappeared. I don't know where it went. My editor saw it and remembers writing it. Laurent remembers seeing it. I remember writing it and reading it. And then we could not find it anywhere. No backups, no email exchanges. And we're really diligent about backing things up and saving it to my computer and on Google Drive. And it was gone. And I realized, and I wrote about this, I had to rewrite the whole chapter. And I wrote, whatever I wrote was a lie because I have no idea how to do this. And I am failing miserably. And so it was a really great chapter for me because I had to write it twice. And also because it's really honest in that I don't have it all figured out. And that's what another thing I really wanted to do with the book. And one of my favorite reviews says, this book is what most spiritual books are not. It's relatable and it's down to earth. And it's not like we are on top of the mountain and we've got it all figured out and listen to us. It's like, I'm still learning and I'm in the trenches right there with you. And let's figure it out together. These are some things that have worked for me. These are some things I don't yet have figured out, but I think are important. And it's very interactive. Like each chapter ends with journaling prompts. It's a very write your own adventure, which I think young people really appreciate because we're all about individualism and being unique and one of a kind.
Awesome. Thank you, Lakshmi. There's in the chat, there's a comment for you. So I'll let you while I continue the conversation, and maybe you can come back after I say a few more words. And then we're going to open it up I want everybody to be part of the conversation. So I'll just say a few more words about it. We're going to have events. So we're having an event in Asheville. We're going to have an event in Charleston and other places as well. And one of my inspirations is rather than us talking about spirituality, I'm inviting in Asheville a 14-year-old young woman who's come up from a Hindu family to ask us questions from her point of view. What is a 14-year-old thinking about spirituality? And sharing at that level. When I was in freshman year in high school, I was part of Children's Express, which was a newspaper run by children. All the reporters had to be preteen and all the editors had to be younger than 18. And we did an incredible amount of work. And one of the things that we did is we would go to senators or Mr. Rogers, I interviewed him, or other people. And it was amazing for me to see that questions coming from somebody younger, like preteen, they would drop a lot of the bullshit and just be very honest and real. It was like they couldn't maintain that facade when talking to a child or a younger person. In the same way, I think our spiritual life and our spiritual walk should be like that with Baba and with others, like transparent. And, like Lakshmi said, I don't have it all figured out. I'm still following Baba every day. I'm not a guru. I haven't mastered anything. All I'm trying to do is find a way to get a little bit closer to Baba every day. How do I do that? How do I remember him? How do I love him? How do I love him in Vanessa and the children? How do I love him in people at work, in the woman who rings me up at the register at the grocery store, in all the different ways. So now I would really love to open it up to the whole floor. Lakshmi, did you want to comment on the meeting chat comment or just did you read
I
that?
responded privately to Elizabeth.
Okay,
but
good.
Gratitude.
Can we open it up to the whole floor for Q&A and kind of get the conversation open? Anybody? You have to come off mute.
Well, I could pose a question to the group that people can respond to get it started. I'd love to.
I can also recruit people like Charles and others to chime in.
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing gray hair on the Zoom call. I hope it's okay to speak that observation out. And so I'm wondering if there's grandchildren in the lives of the people on this call. And when you hear about this book, what you think in relation to sharing some of these topics or issues with your grandchildren, and like having grandchildren, or knowing people ages 16 to 25 right now, what you think their reaction to 21 spiritual lessons for the 21st century might be.
Great question.
Well, I don't have grandchildren, but I have great nieces and nephews who who really are not. I can't think of one of them that's really interested in spirituality at this point. Doesn't mean they won't be if they read this book, right? So, so I know it's a tough audience out there. The culture consumes them, right? And they are busier than I can ever imagine having been in my life with everything, and which I think is a way of avoiding, in some ways, the inner life. I mean, for me, that's my perspective. I don't tell them that. But the other thing that I was thinking, though, about this book, and one of the reasons I thought I would join, besides to support what Laurent's doing, is I love being with the young people who go to the youth solace. I intend to go back this year, and Baba willing, other years. And it does strike me that they are in need of more resources and more ways to kind of flesh out what they already feel or know. They're remarkable people, many of them, spiritually. But yes, they could use a lot of sort of pointers and resources, I should say, and as they develop their spiritual life with Baba. In this case, I mean, not all of them will be directly involved with Mayor Baba, but I think most that come to the youth office, especially if they come back again and again, will develop some kind of spiritual life. So I'm very interested in what the content is. Of course, I haven't read the book yet, but it struck me this is a wonderful new thing to have available for people in that generation. We don't have much.
Yeah. And I'll send you a gift copy, Charles.
No, I can purchase. I just haven't had a chance to focus on it, but that's why I thought I would come, is to get a sense of what it's about. Of course, I want to read it as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hey, I have a question. The problem with the young people I know, they do not read books. So what are they going to do with that? I can bring them the book. They'll put it, oh, yeah, good, thank you. They'll never open it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good question for Laxmi.
Yeah, I can relate. I mean, most of my friends are all about the audiobook, right? Because we're so busy. I can only listen to books when I'm at the gym working out or when I'm driving to work, right? Like, we love the multitask. I think that's also the problem of having grown up with technology and cell phones, is we always want to be as productive as possible, right? The hustle culture. So my goal is we're going to do a book club in March, which please invite all the young people, because that'll hold them accountable to actually reading the book. And we'll go through chapters and do the journal responses together and discuss them. So I think a group thing and interaction is what we need. Young people need more social interaction. And then once we get all that amazing feedback from the book club, my goal is to then create an audiobook. We'll do a second edition, we'll work out all the little kinks and errors and fix things. And then we'll actually record that and put that on Audible, so they don't have to read it.
Good, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Odile.
Okay, I'm going back to mute.
Okay. Anybody else? Thoughts, feelings, questions?
Books, I will say this much. Books are making a comeback among young people. Not that I'm an expert on young people, but I do spend a lot of time with some of them. And all of my great nieces and nephews, all 6 or 7 of them, I can't even remember how many there are, they love reading. They read all the time now. And they're at different ages, they're from, I don't know, 10 up to 18. And they really, really like to read. So I was surprised to see that, so I think it's a there's a market for young people to read as well. We'll see, but I think so.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, Charles, there's a lot, there's memes on the internet, which is like pictures where people put funny words over it. And there's a lot of memes on the internet for young people around, like, if you go to a guy's house and he doesn't have any books, leave immediately. So like books are hot. Books are like, all the dating apps are like, what books do you read? You know, so it's very cool right now.
As a former librarian, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Anne. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. As a former librarian, my interest would be in how do you get these into public and school libraries? And I think particularly a high school library, since you have a chapter on sexuality, would be willing to purchase this. The thing is, librarians buy books based on what is in Publishers Weekly and a couple of other journals. And so all of their purchases, I would say 95% of their purchases come from those journals. So you need to look at marketing to those journals and how to get your review into those journals.
That's great advice, Anne. Thank you very much.
You bet.
I'll make a note of that.
I'm literally texting my sister, who's a librarian at a school in a public library right now, being like, what journals do you use? So I appreciate that.
Vanessa, do you want to make a couple comments?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lakshmi, I was wanting to know if you would share. I love the story of how when you first started writing the book, and your process of what happened, you know, in your first kind of rendition, and then your kind of awakening. And I feel like, you know, the reader might have a similar experience, but if you shared yours, I think that would be lovely.
I think she's talking about the Vipassana retreat.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that was definitely, there's a pre-Vipassana Lakshmi and a post-Vipassana Lakshmi. Thanks for that question, Vanessa. And it's always great to see you. By the way, Vanessa took the beautiful picture on the back of our book. She's in the book throughout it. She's quoted, she's contributed some translations of some poetry that's in the book. So she's present throughout and took this gorgeous picture. And I think another picture that's in the book as well. So Vipassana, for those of you that don't know, is a 10-day silent meditation retreat. No eye contact, no jewelry, no makeup, one small meal a day, 14 hours a day of silent meditation, no exercise, no reading, no writing, just truly, Charles, you were talking about like the busyness as a form of escapism. This would be the antithesis of that. This is sitting in a dark room, genuinely. They have small closets that you go into, no windows, no lights, by yourself for hours a day. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever chosen to do for myself. It was my 30th birthday present to myself. And I'd been working on the book for, I guess, a year at that time. And I thought I was spiritual, right? I thought I was doing the thing. My dad's Indian. We grew up going to temple. My mom's like a universalist. This and that, whatever. I was a life coach. And then I did Vipassana, and it was just like, it felt like being held underwater for 10 days. It felt like right when I was about to drown, they let me have a little sip of air and then shoved me back under the water. It was like the most miserable experience I've ever had in my life. And at the end of it, I was just like miserable and angry and sad and crying. And everyone else is like, I healed my relationship with my mother and I feel so free. And I'm like pissed off. And I'm like, that was horrible. I just closed my eyes and thought of murder every time for 10 hours a day. And it never got better. And I never stopped thinking about it. And I'm crying and everyone's so happy and light. And the facilitators were like, it's good. Like you're having the real experience. And I'm like, well, everyone else is like having a way better experience. Like I must have done it wrong or something, like it just didn't make sense to me. So I did it a second time immediately after that. Cause I thought like, oh, maybe I missed something, and I did it a second time and it was just as miserable. And I remember crying. And I'm like folding towels because it's all volunteer run. And I volunteered the second time and I'm crying and folding the towels. And they come up to you at the end to make sure you're like, okay to go back into society. And she's like, "You doing all right?" And I was like, "I'm just deafened by the cries of my own sadness." Like it's never been louder in there, and it was silent. And so then I brought that realness to the book, right? That really changed both my writing, the writing style, and the honesty with which I brought. Because I think before I was definitely writing from more of a place of like ego. I'm a coach, let me tell you. And then I did Vipassana, it just like cracked me wide open. And I just was deafened by the cries of my own sadness. And then I just brought that realness to the book. So I hope that spoke to what you were referring to, Vanessa. And if it didn't, well, that's what I got today.
No, that's great. I love that. It's very real. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think it takes that kind of, you know, we use our kind of internal compost to kind of drive us forward, that fuel that you know, becomes fertile ground.
Mhm.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
And for those of you that are interested in Vipassana, it's worldwide, it's free, volunteer run, vegetarian, good Indian food is served, and really, really powerful stuff.
Awesome. Who wants to go next? Any questions, comments, thoughts, feelings? Talking
Jeff's
about
got his hand raised.
Jeff,
21 lessons.
Sure. Where to begin? Thank you for writing this book, Laxmi and Laurent.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
caring.
The Vipassana that you went to, Laurent, I'm sorry, Lakshmi, that's a very intense diving into an area that is, you need a lot of preparation for that usually. And I think a lot of young kids, and I've worked with a lot of young kids as a teacher, as a guidance counselor in New York City high schools, taught meditation to high school students also. Most of the students, in my opinion, never go near Vipassana the way you did in that particular. I don't know if it was in Shelbourne, Mass. With
Shelbourne, yeah.
Yeah, I've been there too at Shelbourne, and it was the most intense Vipassana experience of my life. And quite honestly, I would never do it again. And I had been sitting for many years prior to even going there, and it was very skillfully and consciously run. But to your book and to the students and to Baba and to future generations of kids and adults that will be loved and love Baba. One of my questions is, this book, do you have a podcast that's an ongoing podcast where students can go into your podcast and as they're reading, hear somebody like you or Laurent or Charles or Vanessa talk about the book and also give them a chance to call in, because there is so much that can be had reading a book like that. And a lot of kids are not that receptive to reading that book. But the word gets around that Vipassana, that podcast of Megan Babu with Laurent and Lakshmi, you got to listen to it. The actual hearing and connecting the book to people, I think kids do need some kind of a teacher of sorts. I think that's really, really critically important, because the book itself, that's one point that I just want to share. I think the book, with an accompaniment of a podcast with really sensitive people, especially who love Baba and but with Baba, would be very, very important. For example, I remember the first day I'm teaching a meditation class at Westside Alternative High School for the most volatile kids who punched out teachers. There's a room of about 40 kids. They don't know a thing about meditation, and I welcomed them. And immediately, a young woman calls out in the back of the room, "I got to ask you a question." I said, "Sure, sure, what?" She said, "My mother just kicked me out of my apartment this morning. I'm gone for at least 3 or 4 days." And I said, "Who can help Sonia?" And I had 3 or 4 women raise their hands, and I said, "Why don't you just, talk right now?" And she got a place to stay for the next 3 or 4 days. Now that's an extreme example, but you'd be surprised what kind of questions would come from the people who are listening to your podcast. That's a very extreme example, and not just limited to the urban cities. uh, the book. So I'm looking at the book and I saw your titles, and I think whatever personal way that this book can be put out, and I don't know if you want to put this out, forgive me for not knowing all the details. There are ebooks on the computer that kids can get for a reduced price. I think, and I know, you of course are a young writer and you want to make a living at writing and you don't want to give the book away, but I think you want to make it accessible high school students in the most easiest way that's possible, because they're looking for ease. They're looking for something that they're not to go to a bookstore in the lives that I don't know if they're going to go to a bookstore. So
Yeah.
once again, I'm
So,
just shooting. Yeah.
yeah, Jeff, what you're saying is fantastic. I think Lakshmi and I would like to follow up with you outside of this meeting to ask your guidance about how we could work more closely with the students in the New York City high schools. I'm sure there's some sort of entryway into that. And I love everything you're saying. We could certainly create a podcast. I'm not sure I can drag Charles Haynes into that, but I would love to. Charles is, a busy guy, but I love your idea. I'd love to have Charles and Vanessa involved on that. And
Let me respond to you for a second. I would gladly talk with you on the phone. I retired 23 years ago from the New York City school system, which
Okay.
I call, and so do my black colleagues, call the slave ships of the 20th and 21st century. I would not go near anything happening with the New York City school system because, I mean, if Baba says to me and you ask me, and I can, but you have to understand the New York City school system is run by people who are so out of touch with humanity. The political prostitution of the people at the highest levels, and I don't know many of them. I know some of them, well, they're retired now, who were really lovers of God, not Meher Baba necessarily, but the New York City school system is not going to be receptive, with one exception, which I'll talk to you about, the alternative high schools, and I've looked in two of them. So I would be able to talk with you. I just want to give you a heads up. That
Yeah.
school system is run by the most reactionary people, and there are many, many people that do love kids.
Okay. Okay.
People who control those schools do not love kids. I'm just being very honest with what you're going to deal with,
Yeah.
and we'll see.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give other people a chance to speak as well. Thank you, Jeff, for that. And I want to share a quote from beloved Baba that what you were sharing, Jeff, reminded me of. Baba said, "No amount of meditation and prayer can do what helping others can do." I really love that quote. So I think it's all great, but I love the verb, the doing, and so who wants to go next? Thoughts and feelings. We're talking about
Diana has her
21
hand raised. Diana, go share.
Yeah, I love everything I've heard so far, and I have just one small piece to add to that, and that is I would love to see special outreach to young brown kids and young black kids, because my impression is that those communities may not willingly and spontaneously come to something of this nature. And I've been a teacher for many years, many of them in public schools, I've always been with the younger kids, but they get so overlooked so often, and the need is great there.
Thank you for that. I made a note of that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
And I just feel called to say I am half brown, even though I look totally white. My experience of a lot of brown and black cultures, when I think brown, I think like it could be anything, but if we're talking about Latin and Central American, there's a strong Catholic influence. And then of course, a lot of black culture is more Christian. So I think there is a lot of spiritual presence in those communities. It just may not be 21st New Age spirituality or Baba-centered spirituality or meditative contemplation spirituality, but I don't know why I feel like, disclaimer, they got spirituality. It's just a different types.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else? Thoughts and feelings? 21 spiritual lessons for the 21st century.
I would like to know how you're going to address the issue of suicide.
Laxmi, you want to take it, or do you want me to take it?
I want to quote you because
Go for it.
it's in the book, and to me, it's so profound. If I may speak to your personal experience, which is in the book, Laurent's father died by suicide when he was a teenager. So if anyone can speak to the issue of suicide in a really intimate and personal way, it's my co-author and mentor. And he said, it is the hammer and chisel that sculpted me into who I am. And so I think starting off the book with that really personal share kind of sets the foundation. And then I talk about my experiences of having people in my family choose death by suicide. So we start the book by both raising that issue, sharing the statistics on it, and then sharing our personal lived experience to build our own credibility. And then we kind of build on, the whole book is basically solutions to not kill yourself. It's not written like that. It's not like guide 21 reasons to not kill yourself, but that's kind of what it is. And so we build on it, but we start with like sharing the situation, sharing our why, sharing our personal narrative, and then sharing solutions. So that's how I think we're dealing with it. And Laurent, now that I've quoted you and shared your story, I'd love to hear if you have anything.
Yeah. No, I thought that was beautiful, Laxmi. I could spend the entire rest of this meeting talking about this subject, but I don't want to do that. It's a giant subject. I'll say a few things about it. And Charles, I'd love you to chime in here because this goes really deep to my heart. Many people in the spiritual communities that I've come across, whether it's Meher Baba or Christianity or many other faiths, there's a debate about free will versus God's will. Do we even have free will? Is it all predestined? Even Vanessa and I go back and forth about this. So it's an ongoing conversation that I've had with Vanessa for 9 years. To the people who say to me, there's no free will, everything is preordained by God, I say, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Are you telling me then that God wanted my father to commit suicide? That slows the conversation down there, because then they're like, how do you respond to that, right? And what I've come to now it's almost 40 years that I've been with Baba. And I don't claim to know a whole lot, but I've come to a few understandings in my own nature. And that is that I have free will so that I can use my free will to love Baba, to love others. If I didn't have free will to love or withhold love or to do any other things, it couldn't really be love. The purpose of free will in my life is to allow myself to freely give my love, to surrender to Baba, to obey or disobey Baba. It's so that it can be a real relationship. Otherwise, I don't think it's real. And I'll just leave it at that for now. But thank you.
Well, I mean, I think I don't want to get us into too much of the weeds of Baba's cosmology here, because this is not the focus, but I will say this much from what I've gathered anyway. There's only one will, Baba says. My will, your will, Lakshmi's will, ultimately is God's will. There's not two wills. There can't be. Erich brought this home to me 1,000 times. So there's no, how can there be that? Erich says, you are not. So how can you have free will? You do not exist. So I said, then what is this that we do? He says, yeah, you think you have it. And Baba calls it apparent free will, because you can't get up in the morning unless you think, oh yes, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. And Erich says, yeah, it's natural that you think that. And yeah, do that. But always remember, you do nothing, because it's all written. In the beginningless beginning, it's there. Now we say, oh, you mean it's determined? Eric says, no. Baba says, it is. So what you call future is now. What you call past for Baba is now. Present is now. So how do you experience it? Because of your ignorance, you experience it as time changing. You know, you experience it as, oh, I can do this tomorrow, or that, or I did this in the past. Eric said, that's not true, but you feel that way. So Eric said, feel that way, but just remember, Baba says, not a leaf falls without my will, means everything is the will of God, because what we're really doing is living the play, the script, which was written long, long ago. Or Baba also uses the metaphor of film. Baba says, this is the film that I took long, long ago, and it's being projected, and you think, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You're not. You're living, Baba says, and to switch metaphors, you're living in God's dream. That's all. So how can you have those who are in the dream have any will whatsoever, because they do not exist? I am not. So in reality, I don't know that. I don't experience that. But Baba says, you are not. Laurent is not. There's no such thing. So anything that happens is the will of God. Baba says your task in ignorance is to wake up more and more to be aware that everything is the will of God, everything. And the more you're aware of that, the freer you are. But Eric said, be careful though, not to ever think that you do anything. So I said, well, what would Baba have us do? And isn't there, grace and all this? Yeah, he went on, but he said, Baba said to us, do one thing. If you can do this when you're with me, this is all I ask of you. Do everything as though everything depended on your actions, and simultaneously remind yourself, I do nothing. Can you do that? And I said, well, I don't know, but he said, do it, because you have to do your best. But don't think that that means you're doing anything, or that you have some will. You're only carrying out what has already been written long, long ago. That's all. You're living your part. You're saying your lines, but you have to do your best at that. Does that make sense? That's what Baba gives us. I don't know. That's how I feel. That's how I live.
I'm trying. I'm striving. It's a bit of a paradox. Elizabeth.
Yeah, sorry, don't have my video on. This is such a conundrum, and I do speak from experience. I wasn't really going to say anything, but there have been 2 suicides in my immediate family. And the hard part for me, my whole life has been, what? Why? It's just really inconceivable. So, I didn't think I was going to be, would be very, I was curious, but the minute I heard Lakshmi's explanation, I knew why I had to be here. I don't know how you're going to be able to explain this to children who experience this and then have to deal with it for the rest of their lives. It's just inexplicable how someone who is either, a sibling or parent, can do this. And when you're a child, you haven't even learned about the physical universe yet, much less any philosophy to guide you. I congratulate you on doing this book. If you can save one life, it's successful. And I, in my small, simple way, do everything I can to save one life or give a teeny bit of happiness to one person, even if Baba, like Baba says in the discourses, it's only a smile. Because we never know if that smile is going to help someone or if some word happens at the right time. And I do pay a lot of attention to intuition. Called a friend today because she's been on my mind for 3 days. Turns out she's just had a biopsy. So I have to act. If I don't act, I find out later I've neglected something. But I admire what you're doing. And I just wonder how in the world can such a difficult paradox, as Charles said, he explained that part so well, but you still wonder why would Baba choose to live out the film of someone committing suicide? Why? You know, and there's zillion motivations for this type of thing, and you really never know. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Just to
Beautiful.
add to that, thank you for sharing it. It's very beautiful. I just think one has to remind oneself about what Baba is saying here, and that is Baba doesn't choose, you see. I mean, now there is grace, but even if Baba uses his avataric grace, that was in the original whim as well. In other words, that was accounted for already. That was nothing new. So there is nothing new. So it is. Now, of course, there is no death unless it's the real death. And we have to find ways to help people through what they think is death, and help them to the real death, because that's what Baba's work is. But Baba says, you can't do anything to help people. So I think that liberates us sitting here now. It liberates Laurent and Laxmi. Their book will help people, maybe, you see. I mean, it will, if Baba wants it. But the thing is, that's already been written. What they're doing is carrying out what Baba's already laid out. They think, oh, I'm going to get the book out to Publishers Weekly, and it will be read and librarians will get it. They think that. Baba says that's not true, but that's fine. If you think you're doing it, do it. But if you get in Publishers Weekly, that's Baba's will, God's will is already there. If you don't, that's God's will as well. So you have no reason to worry about it one way or the other, because nothing you can do to get in Publishers Weekly. You know, but why should you try? And Baba says, you try because you love me and you want to grow closer to me. Not because you're going to get into Publishers Weekly or you're going to help the young people who are thinking about suicide. If you think that, then you will not do your best. That is your thoughts that keep you from doing your best. Put yourself between you and the work. So to help people who are thinking about suicide, remind yourself first and foremost, I do nothing. And then when you get out of the way enough, maybe Baba will use you to help them. And maybe that's already been planned, and that's a great blessing for you. But if it doesn't work, then that's already there as well. So Baba doesn't choose what the script is. He says it's perfect what it is. It's perfect. Why would I change it? Baba says, why would I change it? You asked me to give you health. You asked me to give you this. You asked me to give you that. Why would I do that when it's all laid out in the best way to bring you to your real self, which is the whole point of everything that happens, good, bad, and ugly. You know, it's a messy business.
Thank you,
Thank
Charles.
you so much, Charles. Two things I want to say in response, and then I see, Anne, you have your hand raised again. One, Charles, I've said from the get, if no one reads this book but me, it will have been worth it, because the process of writing this book transformed me so much. Like Vanessa was alluding to earlier, I thought I was a spiritual person, and then I wrote this book and became living my version of the Word of God, right? And I had to really step into that. I did a year of sobriety during the process of writing this book, and celibacy, and just radically stepped into who I am in a bigger and bigger way, and continue to now that we're marketing it. It's like, whoa, now I really got to own my truth and myself. So I love what you said about that. Like, if nothing comes of this book other than the process of creating it, it was part of the plan for me, for sure. And to your point about how to explain suicide to young people, there is an amazing podcast on this. If you Google This American Life, explaining suicide to children, it'll probably come up. There's a whole center in like New Mexico or Arizona where they take kids who have experienced great loss, and they explain to toddlers like cancer and suicide and addiction and overdose and all these really complex. It's like a grieving camp for kids anywhere from 2 to 17. And the podcast goes over how they explain death and different versions of it to different age groups in different ways that they can comprehend. And it's an amazing podcast. So definitely worth a listen if you're interested in that. Laurent, do we have time for Anne's comment or question?
Yes, we do.
Anne, I'd love to hear from you. Are you there? Your hand is raised. Okay. Maybe not, but she did put some stuff in the chat.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, your hand is raised, so I thought maybe you had something else.
I'm not Anne. I'm Anne Elizabeth, and I go by Elizabeth.
Got it. Okay, sorry. I thought someone said Anne earlier in reference to you, so Anne Elizabeth.
No, just call me Elizabeth. I never use Anne at all, except when I write and publish. But anyway, actually, I think I that was a mistake. But I do listen to This American Life, and I can look that up. And anyway, I wanted to thank Charles for all the comments he's been making. It's just, I just think unless you're in the frame of mind that Baba gives to us, I don't know how people can grasp this. It's so hard. And of course, I come from a Presbyterian background, and we're constantly dealing with this free will versus predestination. So it's very familiar to me from, my very beginnings. But and I'm glad Charles reminded me again that we are not the doer, that Baba is the doer. Baba is doing it in all of us, and consciously or unconsciously in each one. I think it's easier if you have a perspective from Baba, a Baba perspective, to accept this. I think it's extremely hard in the world we live in today to make the leap, because we believe so emphatically, and it's even hard for me not to believe it, that this world is real, because you're basically denying what we think is. It's a paradox. I can't even talk about it because it's so paradoxical.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing. Thank you. I see Ken has his hand up.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. First, thank you again for writing the book. I look forward to reading it, and known Laurent for a long time, and hello to Laxmi. It's quite exciting, this project for the two of you. And about free will versus determination, predetermination. Anyway, I once saw that there was no conflict. They were the same thing, but don't ask me to explain it. One way to look at it is that often we're asking the wrong questions. We're framing it wrong. We're looking from the wrong angle, It's all just a flow. It's not Baba deciding and all these kinds of things. It's just a flow of perfection from the divine being out into creation and back into oneness. So that's how I see it.
That's a lovely image, Ken. I like that. And, but this whole thing of free will versus determination, but Baba liberates us from the Protestant notion of predestination and all this, and how does God allow evil if God knows ahead of time and all that stuff, because Baba says that's not how God is. God God is, there is nothing else. So ultimately, when we say this is God's will, we're saying it's my will. You see? So I have as much free will as God does if I knew that I was that, but I don't. The problem is that I don't know it. But Baba says, you say, well, how can God do this? The real question is, why do you do it? Well, you do it because you want to wake up to who you really are. And so that is the driver that makes us do all that we do, and the dream, live the dream, if you will, is that we want to wake up. So Baba's will, God's will, is ultimately the will of every single living thing. It's what we really want, in other words. So how could we say, oh, why would God do this when it's what we really want? That's all I'm saying. It's his will.
Yeah, it reminds me of the quote that Baba might have said it in an interview in Myrtle Beach about how when people ask him why all the suffering, and he said, people ask why all this, people create suffering for each other, and then they ask, why does God allow the suffering? And 90% of suffering is self-created or human-created. So there's the freedom there, in one sense, one way of looking at it,
Yeah, but Baba would say even that is already written.
Yeah.
Even that. We say, yeah, we experience it as self-created, and we should be aware of that. But Baba says ultimately it isn't. Ultimately, it is you are going through what you have to go through to wake up.
Yep. Yep. I see Ann Barker raised her hand.
Thank you. Getting back to the book, I wanted to ask, in terms of how you formulated the book and made decisions as to what to include, did you have a like a focus group of young people to find out what exactly they wanted to know about spirituality? Thank you.
That's a great question, Ann. I love that question. I'm going to let Laxmi start, and then I'll follow on.
Well, I am a young person. So I think the topics were in part that at the time I was doing a podcast called The Conscious Hotline. And so I could tell which topics resonated with people based on how many views, how many shares, how many follows, how many rewatches, right? I had all of those metrics through YouTube analytics and Instagram analytics. So I could see what kind of topics were resonating with my generation. I wish I would have done more for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I realized I focused most of my conversation around what resonated with my millennial peers. And I'd say we're on the older end of who this book is targeted towards. So something I'll do differently in my next book. But I did use topics that were hot on the Conscious Hotline in this book. And then, it was really fitting to see that within 24 hours of going live on Amazon, we reached like a #1 release bestseller in the category of sexual psychology, because I put sex in there because it's interesting and important to talk about, especially for young people who don't realize how sacred it is, but also it will get the attention of young people if you talk about sex and drugs.
Yeah. And so I want to just kind of piggyback on that. The short answer is no. There was no such focus group. It's a great idea. We didn't even think of it, I don't think. From my point of view, when Laxmi and I came up with this 21 lessons and I said, I'll take 10, you can do 11. I just sort of have a process with Baba where I sat with Baba and I said, okay, Baba, if I'm really going to have this target audience, what are the 10 most important things that I believe should be shared? I mean, in all honesty, I just chose the ones that I felt I couldn't, leave off the table. And I knew Lakshmi had selected the ones she had. So it just worked out great from my point of view that we didn't overlap. I want to add a couple things here that, I was hyper aware of as we were wrapping up the book. We were still writing and editing. And of course, the war broke out with Russia and Ukraine, which is very close to my heart because I am very attuned to the Ukrainian situation. And it was before the problem with Hamas and Israel. But I was also aware that the right wing in America has been on the rise. And so I've seen a lot of violent thoughts, violent actions against the LGBTQ community. And, you know, my mentor, Don Stevens, and others on the call and in other places are, you know, that's a very important cause and community to be aware of how we navigate spirituality in light of all that violence. And so I brought that into the book. It really could have been many books. It could be 21 books, but how to do that in a way that's not too preachy and heavy-handed when you're talking to the younger generation, that is a very tricky subject. So I think we did our best, and there's going to be a second edition. So if you have input, feedback, ideas, I would love to hear it. I'm sure Laxmi would too. We're going to revise it. And really, there's no end to the spiritual lessons. We just picked 21 of them. And maybe the younger generation will say, well, what about this? And what about that? And they'll come up with topics that we didn't even think of. So maybe these events, these book launch events that we do, we're doing, I said, one in Asheville at the end of this month, one in Charleston at the end of February, hopefully New York, and maybe I got a sense maybe California. But maybe the young people there will help us by telling us which topics they want to hear more about.
And I put it in the chat just so everyone can see, we are doing a book club in March. So that's the time, if you have young people in your life that you want to read this book, or you want to read it with them, or you want to read it, join the book club. And that's where we'll be diving into more of that feedback for that second edition. Just email Laurent saying that you want to be a part of it, and then he can add you to the list. And I think I saw
Yes. Is there another hand up?
Yeah, Laurent and Laxmi, just a question. Do you have a chapter on letting go in either of your chapters from the point of view of being here now? Because whether you're 16 or you're 36 or whatever age we are here, so much of our lives are in desire and preferences and what we want and what we don't want. And a chapter on letting go of that part that is the resistor within one. I can just say it this way. Michael Singer has some wonderful talks on his podcasts. And I think that if I was a 16-year-old kid and you had a chapter on letting go, as difficult as it is to couch it in words, if you really want to be with a community of people who can, when you're holding on, say, hey, Jeff, let go. Or who, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I just asked you whether it's in this book or the next book. Please go on, Laxmi. You're pointing. I can't.
Number 12, Laurent wrote it, surrender.
Well,
So that's in there.
very grateful.
Surrender's there. Obedience to the divine also talks about letting go for sure. 199. Humility, there's some letting go in there. And then also forgiveness. So it's peppered throughout, I would say. And
Thank
probably
you for that.
One
But
last
that's-
thing on the whole thing. When you're 16 and 18 and 20, as Ram Dass would say, you have to have developed a very strong ego. So here Barbara is encouraging us to let go of our ego and to surrender. In the same time, you're a 16-year-old kid, you have academic pressure, athletic pressure, all kinds of pressures, and your coach or your teacher, your parent is going to say, you can do it, Jeff. Yes, you're stronger than you think you are. And so for us, that's just a question. How is it appropriate to teach a 16, 18, 19-year-old kid to surrender to God's will? I don't know the answer, but it's a big question.
I think the answer is yes. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what would you say? I missed.
I think the answer is yes. And thank you.
And I
see
agree.
Elizabeth's hand up again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a question regarding children. I don't have any children. I have grandnieces and nieces and nephews. But I love children. And so my question is, how can a child with no spiritual upbringing or something to hold on to deal with these issues? I'm sure you're addressing this in your book, but how? So, I mean, I was lucky. I had a very strong faith-based family, and had people who helped me. Plus, I was just drawn, in that way. I have faith, or I couldn't have gotten through some of the stuff. And I can't imagine how children without some kind of faith getting through life, because there's so many difficulties. And I actually am concerned about a person I know who was raised basically without that, and he's managing okay, but I just wonder about all the thousands and millions who probably don't have that. And how are you addressing that in your book? And in your process, whatever it is you're doing, yeah.
I can speak to that, and I see Charles has his hand up, and I think Laxmi might be able to speak to this too, but I'll go first. I was not raised in a faith-based family, and so the suicide of my father was the kickstart of my engine to wake up to spirituality. And by Baba's grace, I had a number of mentors come into my life who brought home to me Baba's message in various ways. And I'm prepared to be a mentor like that to others. I think the best way, from my point of view, is from heart to heart mentoring, and in any way that we can show up for each other. Laxmi, do you want to speak to that at all? And then Charles.
Yeah, I think the purpose of the book is exactly for kids who weren't raised with faith. That's like the demographic, and that's, I mean, statistically, like I shared, that's most young people, right? Lowest rate of church attendance in recorded human history is happening right now. The only sectors of religion that are growing in the United States are Orthodox Judaism and evangelical Christianity. Those are the ones that are growing. Every other Presbyterian, Lutheran, Unitarian, everything else, numbers are dropping, they're dying off, and they're not being replaced. So there is a huge spiritual lack in this country. And this whole book is geared around exactly what you're talking about, Elizabeth. And I think one of the ways we do it is by not being like, this is the way, right? Because young people don't want to hear that. Americans are individuals, and they're unique and special and different from everyone else, right? That's that's America. That's what we're raised on. So this whole book is like literally the last chapter. Every chapter has an image, and the very last chapter is called Gotta Have Faith, and it's the coexist symbol of every religion, every major religion. People know it more as the bumper sticker, but this is actually the original one, and then it was morphed into that bumper sticker, but I went with the original one. So it's like, we lack faith in what exists within us because we lack faith in who exists within us. That's a Marianne Williamson quote that starts to end the book in the last chapter. And I think that's exactly how we do it, making it non-denominational, making it a pick your own adventure, and also making it available to all, regardless of religious background or belief system. If you're Muslim, you can read this book. Christian, read this book. Atheist, read this book. It's for all faiths. Charles?
Well, I think that's lovely and wonderful that you've done that. I just wanted to go back to the cart and horse question for those of us who are connected with Baba. It's, I think, the essential question, or the essential perspective for doing his work. And that is, Baba is the horse, not the cart. And the book is not going to get into certain hands because of all the things you're going to do. In my understanding of what Baba has given us, I'm just trying to say what I've gathered from Baba. I could be wrong. This is what I've gathered. What I've gathered is that if he prompts Laurent and Laxmi to do this book, it's because he has worked for it, and it's already there. Or you wouldn't be prompted, But then he says, if you do it, if you follow the prompt, just remember to say, it's you, Baba, we're not doing it. Or it's you, God, you don't have to use Baba. We're not doing it. And then do it and do the best you can. Put it out there. But Baba says, don't think that you're going to find ways to have people read this or change their lives and all that. Do you think you can do that? Baba says, no. But if he's prompted you to do the book, then he already has the uses for it in the lives of those who are ready for it. You won't have to find them. They will find the book. Now you say, well, then I don't do anything. Erich says to me, when I ever tell Erich that, I said, well, Erich, okay, then I'm not doing anything if he's doing it all. He says, but you won't do that. You won't do that. Why? Because you love him. So you're going to do your best to please him. You're going to do your best to make it available to everyone. But then you're not going to have anything to do with whether that works or does not work. If it doesn't work, then you say, thank you, Baba. It wasn't meant to be. If it works, you say, thank you, Baba, because you already have this plan. So that's why I'm saying we can liberate ourselves from the notion that this book or any project we do for Baba is something we have to worry whether it's going to be successful or not, it's going to reach people or not. We can worry, but it won't change anything. If it's successful, it won't be because we worried about it. And you know, it will be because all of those people who are meant to benefit from this book are waiting for it already. Because and if it wasn't you doing it, let's say you say, oh, Bob, I'm not going to do such a book for young people. Somebody else, he would get somebody else. And because he's already, it's part of the need for the plan to unfold is for there to be such a book. So Baba will find a person. All we can do is say, okay, thank you, Baba, for giving me the opportunity.
I love what you're saying, Charles. Thank you. I love it. Thoughts, feelings about 21 spiritual lessons for the 21st century. Where do we want to go from here?
There was a quote in the chat I want to read from iPhone, which is I think it's the gentleman with the awesome mustache. Thank you so much for joining. I've really enjoyed looking at your facial hair. It is just totally delightful and interesting. Very bold choice. And he put in the chat, think what you like. This life's a fiction and is made up of contradiction. William Blake.
Well, I want to thank you both for being open to Baba prompting you to do this book, for God prompting you to do this book. I mean, that's how I feel about it. And I think, you know, when people take up this work and they do it for him, then, or for the beloved, then it goes well, and he will use it well. So I think it's wonderful that you did that.
Thank you. Well, that might be a good note to end on. Thank you all for coming. Loved hearing all the input and the feedback and the wisdom. Even those who didn't share, you shared your presence with us, and that's meaningful too. So thank you all. If you have any questions after this, we're both available. I put my email in the chat. Laxmi, do you want to put yours in there too?
I have mine as well.
Yeah. And please, if you can, come to the Asheville event or the Charleston event, or if you want us to come to your town, wherever you are, invite us and we can do an event in your town. We love to travel. Laxmi has unusual ways of traveling. I don't know if she wants to talk about that, but she gets around.
I fly for free. Yeah.
All right.
And also I'll be doing an event in Minneapolis in February. So I'm happy to share that with the group if you know people there. And then, like Laurent said, we're going to do a New York City event as well.
Thank you, everybody. Avatar, Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar, Meher Baba Ki
Jai.
Avatar, Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Hey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Laxmi. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Baba. Jai Baba.
Thank you. Thank you,
Good
Bob.
luck. Yeah.
Very beautiful.
Have fun.
Thank you all.
12. Whoops. Got to write your emails down.